Is the right to bear arms responsible for all these school mass shootings? Well, welcome to Mark and Pete Live. I'm Pete the clergyman. With me as ever is Mark the businessman. So then, what have you got on this? Real problems in the US over mass shootings. It's not looking good.
Yes, Clergyman Pete, here we are again on this rather somber subject. In recent times, a gunman attacked a school in Texas and was able to enter a school building unobstructed. The police said that no armed guard challenged the teenager who was actually the culprit, an 18-year-old man, and it was unclear if the school door was even locked. Now, this isn't the first time that this has ever happened, and it seems to be a perpetual problem. Is this simply as a result of the ability for a teenager to be able to walk into a gun store, buy a gun, a semi-automatic, and simply take revenge for various reasons? And I suppose the question that we will really ask is what does America really need to do to make the changes? Or is it just simply that it's going to remain a harsh lesson? Here's a thought. Once a misguided child went to school and sat in the corner upon a lonely stool. They soon found out how to play the fool, which then triggered acts of ridicule. Graduating with grudges for not being cool, they turned automatically to a tyrannical tool. Now their weapon of revenge is a repetitive rule, and the lesson learned is that life is cruel. Clergyman Pete, I ask you, what's your view on the right to bear arms?
Well, in America, there is the right to bear arms, and the principle behind it, I think, is a good one. It's a measure that mitigates against a tyrannical government from just running roughshod over your rights. If you can defend yourselves against an aggressor, you're in a better position. But of course, it also results in guns being available more widely than they are, for example, in Britain, where there is no such right enshrined in the Constitution. But when it comes to these mass shootings, we often find that the typical reaction amongst many people, I guess we would say, especially in left-wing politics, but just many people in America and in Britain more widely, however, that the need is to have more restrictions on gun ownership. But in America, including in Texas, where one of these recent shootings took place, the shooter who killed people in a school violated many of the gun laws already in place.
Yes.
So this pours doubt in my mind on how it would benefit the situation to have more restrictions, since the shooter himself didn't obey the laws already in place.
Yeah.
Since the Columbine shooting, which was back in 1999 in Colorado in the US, there's been, a tightening up on laws to do with the use of guns. But what we've seen is that multiple times, including in this occasion, the person carrying out the shooting has gone through all the checks. The laws were in place. They've gone through all of them. But the problem is that the police didn't follow up on a suspicious character. Yeah. And so time and time again, it's not the laws that need tightening up. It's police action that needs to be put into place.
Well, here's another thought, and there's a sense of irony here. Is it also about, dare I say, education, in the sense that
the
laws that we can talk about, which reflect where it is possible for people to buy guns, is one issue. But is it really that the message is not getting through to people? This individual, and again, we don't necessarily need to talk about the individual per se, but we've seen this happen before, where we'll call a grudge revenge has taken place. We know that people have bad experiences at school. We understand that sometimes people come out of school wanting to take revenge on individuals, teachers, and others. But when it's vented in this way, which sadly takes innocent individuals, is it just simply that the lack of awareness, the social awareness of the impact of what this does to people, not just the victims, of course, but to the families, the communities, etc.? Is there something lacking on education for children as well as adults and communities here about what gun crime really does for people, and what its effect is on an entire nation?
Well, yeah, no, I maybe yes, I think that's a good question. But one question that I have now, this is based on an experience I had, but it's not to do with guns. But you'll see why I'm mentioning it. There was a murder that took place near to where I used to live and work in an area of London, which was a stabbing, and the murder took place with lots of people around. Everyone saw it.
Yeah.
And it was taking place as a revenge against the fact that the person who was stabbed and died was a tall, nice bloke. That's basically a tall, muscular, fit, successful, who had stopped a fight. So one of the people in that fight thought, well, I've got to take it. I can't have him being liked by everyone. Got angry with him and stabbed him. Now, to bring him down to size, he never, and this came out at the trial, it never occurred to him that he was killing him. And I believe that was true. The sentencing reflected that they believe that he did intend to kill him. But I can see that in many occasions, without taking the particular incidents in account, people just don't realise how dangerous certain weapons are. A long, sharp knife, you stab someone in the right place, they're going to die.
Of course.
You can't just think, I'm just hurting them. And with a gun, of course, that is amplified even more. A gun, you think, well, fire it off doesn't hurt anyone. Yeah, but if you fire it into the right place of the body, people either instantly dead or they're maimed for life. And I think, yes, education not in the sense of reading books about it, but of seeing examples of it, or having to fire a gun in a controlled situation, or fire a gun into something and see. If you viscerally can see the damage done, maybe you'll be able to see the issue. To give another example from my own experience, in order to persuade people not to smoke, the most effective way that I had when I was a school teacher was to smoke a cigarette. Not me personally, I've never done that, but I got a machine to smoke it in a fume cabinet.
Right.
And the smoking was done through a filter. And then what I did was didn't take out the cigarette. I took the filter out of the fume cabinet, so they couldn't smell anything, because all in a fume cabinet, all the air is being sucked away down a tube out of the room, so they don't smell it. I just took the filter out, and in the instant I took it out, people were sickened and grabbed their noses and went, ugh. And this, of course, put them off smoking. They hadn't realised how disgusting it was.
Yeah.
And if you realised just how horrible a gun wound is, maybe it would impact on people the importance of training and the importance of handling guns with utmost respect. So I think you're right. Education in that way, in real innovative, involving, experiential training is very important.
It sounds like, again, in that case, it's about not glamorizing something.
Yeah.
So whether it be about, the use of guns, don't glamorize it. The use of knives, don't glamorize it. I mean, you use another point about cigarettes. Okay, that's not necessarily an offensive weapon, but the point here is that it is about showing the consequences. I wanted to ask you a different type of angle here, because it has been suggested by many people in the US Congress. There have been many politicians in the United States have said, well, look, the route to this is to just simply give the teachers weapons, actually empower the teacher to have a weapon. Now, you as a former teacher, what would your feeling be that the idea of carrying a gun into a classroom?
Now, the thing is, I don't think that that's the way to do it, by the way. I think that if you were to have a gun, have it in a gun safe. But I think that I think it's a good idea. I know I used to work in a Jewish school in central London where there was constant threat of an attack.
Yeah.
And there were several sort of threats, but an attack didn't happen while I was there. anti-Semitism seems to be across the Western world pretty rife. In a subculture, but still there constantly all the time. Hatred against the pupils of the school was such that someone was shot at, admittedly with an air rifle while I was there. Not I didn't see the attack happen, but it happened while during my time there. And there was constant drills on how to behave. And if there was a bomb, you had to get out of the building. If there was a killer, you had to stay in and lock the door. And the teacher, myself, all I had to do was sit against the door.
Yeah.
So that he couldn't get in and get shot in the back, possibly. Anyway, if I'd had a gun, I think that would have been very helpful. But not just give me a gun. I would need to be trained in it. Yeah.
Well, exactly. I mean, I was going to ask the counter, and this is where I have the concern, is apart from obviously the cost, the training, etc., teachers don't go to teaching school and to build their career to become a weaponry expert.
No, I'm not saying no. I would say, and I don't know what the particular suggestion is. I think there haven't been direct proposals. I think they're just off the cuff suggestions. I believe ex-President Trump said something at the recent NRA meeting that he was talking about providing guns. There's no concrete proposal. I believe, just from what has been said, the general suggestions that have been said by public figures, the idea is that those people who have guns, and there's a gun culture over in the US. Some people have guns, retain extra training, and you are allowed to take your gun in. Not necessarily that people who aren't interested in guns and don't know how to use them should take them in and be forced to have them. But rather that if you had a proportion of teachers who would normally carry a gun in other situations, you allow them to take them into school, and they perhaps have some extra training on how to deal with a mass shooter or terrorist threat. Now, this is my point of view. I think you're going to disagree with this, Mark, but I would say, I think that is a good idea. I just imagine if there had been a teacher in that situation who could have responded, you wouldn't have had to wait. This is the recent school shooting in Texas. You wouldn't have had to wait for the enforcement agent to come in, who did. He came in, acted very, very quickly once he got there, and shot the perpetrator. If one of the teachers could have done that, you would have stopped a lot of killings.
I get that, but here's the counter thing again, which comes back to the yes, you say it's a cultural thing.
Yes.
What from a psychological perspective is that going to do to a teacher, knowing that absolutely he's trying to protect himself, his pupils, and other members of staff, and absolutely that is something in that moment something has to happen. But I guess it's the build up to that, because the consequence for a teacher to be able to take somebody else's life is different from a trained police person or an armed guard, whoever that may be. Now, I know that it's never easy even for them, but there is a different type of training, a different psychology to the role.
I would say, just to counter that, that particular, I don't really hold much truck by that, because yes, they might be psychologically scarred by having to kill someone, but they may save some kids' lives. And so, I take it that not everyone is the sort of psychopathic or at least well-trained tendency, to not feel the impact of having killed someone. Not everyone is in that situation. You can be trained to behave in a psychopathic way. By you're trained. You're not actually a psychopath, but you don't feel the impact of it because of the way you've been trained. And this has been standard practice in the military, and it's come into police training as well. So yes, it is different for them. I recognise that, but I'm just saying that if they had that in place in that school, it's likely that the perpetrator would have been killed earlier. Now, you could take just as a sidestep, there was a more recent killing, of course, in Charleston, in West Virginia, where there was a man shooting an AR-15 style rifle into a crowd that had gathered for a party. I don't know why he was doing that. We can't ask him, because he was killed by a woman who was nearby. So she drew a pistol and shot him because he was trying to kill people in this party. Now, had she not done that, people would have been killed. So it was the fact that she had the gun that she was able to stop shooting with a gun.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things
That's the logic.
no, I understand. I get that. One thing I just want to sort of tie the stories together then in really, which we haven't covered, which is just to conclude, which is what motivates someone to take on this type of act. Even if we just focus on the school revenge and why a teenager would go back to a school, we've seen it before. Why is that happening time and time again? The perpetrator. What is motivating a perpetrator to take a weapon and take a life?
Well, I think it's a complex issue, because there is an element of hatred for the people in the school. Why do you go back into the school you're in? Because bad things happen there. You maybe felt belittled, people hated you. They could be those are the sort of reasons that we hear in that sort of shooting. But here is when, taking your side, and you were arguing for, I suppose, less guns being available in whatever way that's done. I think the availability of guns means that springs to mind.
Right.
As the way that you do it. So, but you see, I'm not. You notice that I'm not arguing for introducing lots of guns into Britain or other places where I'm saying, given that guns are so widely available in America, surely the law-abiding citizens should be provided with the guns to protect themselves and the children when people who are going to misuse their guns have access to them anyway. So that's the reason for it. It's a bit like, here, to give an illustration, it's a bit like nuclear weapons. You have countries that have nuclear weapons. So as in the case of Britain, we want to have nuclear weapons so that we don't get shot by nuclear weapons. And in the same way, if you had these shooters knowing that if they attempted such a thing, they'd be shot before they even got to carry out their little fantasy of revenge, then it could well reduce the number of shootings. I say could well because it hasn't been tried yet. But I would argue that it's best to allow law-abiding citizens, for example, teachers, to be allowed to carry their guns, because you could well reduce the number of fatalities. That's my argument.
Yeah.
But I know that you disagree.
Yeah, well, I think we've sort of reached a point. I think we've covered a number of things, but again, I think that we would certainly welcome the viewpoints of our listeners. But I have a certain sort of conclusion to this.
Yeah. How would you conclude this?
Well, I think that when you look at it, and it comes back to my point, which is I think education is absolutely crucial. And whatever your policy is about having rights to a gun, owning a gun, buying a gun, is one thing. We all face challenges in life. We all face issues. We all have perhaps hold grudges against individuals. But to me, it's all about that critical moment. Before you pull the terminal trigger or try to wield a dangerous knife, before you riot with greater rigor or have violent feelings that are too rife, before the problem gets much bigger or you turn to streets into trouble and strife, before you become a fallen figure, think and instead save a life.